Bangladesh and one on Cambodia. And the first one is from a friend of mine, Tawheed, Noor. So over to you, Tawheed.
Good morning to you all. I am Tawheed, and today I'll be presenting on the topic integrating the genocide in Bangladesh into the national curriculum. This presentation is part of the virtual international conference on teaching about genocide. So the Bangladesh Liberation War was a pivotal moment in our history, marked by significant human rights violations and genocide. Despite its profound impact, this tragic chapter remains absent from our educational curriculum. The purpose of this presentation is to highlight the urgent need for integrating genocide education into the national curriculum of Bangladesh. The Bangladesh Liberation War began in March 1971, and it ends in the same year in December. It was a struggle for independence from Pakistan, characterized by the systematic killing of civilians, intellectuals, and freedom fighters, as well as other genocidal or atrocity crimes were committed. The estimated death toll ranges from 6 to 7 digits, with an official claim of 3 million. Currently, the genocide is clearly mentioned in textbooks and educational materials. This lack of representation results in a lack of awareness and understanding among younger generations, which is a missed opportunity for historical learning and reconciliation. Regarding importance of genocide education, genocide education is crucial for several reasons, we know. Firstly, it ensures that future generations understand the history and heritage. Secondly, it promotes empathy and acknowledges the suffering of victims and survivors, aiding in societal healing and reconciliation. Regarding challenges to integration, there are several challenges to integrating genocide education into the curriculum. These include historical silence with persistent denial and lack of comprehensive documentation, cultural sensitivities involving diverse perspective and political implications, and educational limitations such as scarcity of resources and trained educators. Strategies to effectively integrate genocide education: we can utilize survivor testimonies to humanize the history, incorporate multimedia resources like videos and documentaries, and adopt an interdisciplinary approach by combining subjects like history, literature, and social studies for a holistic understanding. Some case studies we can also need to actually incorporate. So looking at other countries, we can learn from Holocaust education in Germany or Rwanda's approach to teaching about their genocide and so on. These examples would provide effective strategies and methods that can be adapted for Bangladesh. Some implementation challenges that, however, there are implementation challenges to consider. Teacher training is essential, requiring professional development programs for educators. Resource allocation is another challenge, as we need to secure funding and materials for comprehensive education. Lastly, stakeholder engagement is crucial, involving educators, policymakers, and community in the process. Some recommendations, if we look talk about, to move forward, we need to promote advocacy to raise awareness and support for genocide education initiatives. Encouraging academic research and publications on the topic is also important. Finally, developing and integrating genocide education materials into the national curriculum will be essential for long-term success. The potential impact integrate genocide education is significant. It can foster empathy and critical thinking in students, contributing to a more compassionate society. Additionally, it can aid in societal reconciliation and promote global recognition of the Bangladesh genocide. Education plays a crucial role, we know, in developing up standards by instilling values of empathy, responsibility, and vigilance, empowering the youth to engage in critical thinking and active participation in societal issues will help prevent future atrocities and foster a sense of global citizenship and commitment to human rights. In conclusion, I would like to say that integrating genocide education into the national curriculum of Bangladesh is essential for preserving our history and fostering a compassionate and informed society. I encourage ongoing dialogue, commemoration, and remembrance to ensure this chapter of history is not forgotten. And just to add one point here, that to change the mindset is a big challenge for all this effort. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. We're next going to move on to Umewara, why genocide education is important. So over to you.
So good afternoon. I'm right now in the UK, so it's afternoon now. So good afternoon, everyone. And I chose to talk about why genocide education is important. And I'd like to add my experience while teaching in Bangladesh on genocide and justice issues. So why do I think that genocide education is important? Let me start with a story I have grown up with. Not a very pleasant story, but I still want to share it with everyone, that when I was really small, for example, 8 years old, 10 years old, and we used to play in the field with neighbors, with relatives, cousins, I used to hear that there were like red ants and black ants, and they used to say that black ants are the Muslim ants and red ants are the Hindu ants. And do you know the reason why? Because black ants do not bite, but red ants do bite. And all my childhood, I used to believe that this is true. So we used to call the black ants as Muslim ants and red ants as Hindu ants. And definitely when I grew older, I became mature, I understood that there is just one of the myths, one of the narratives that that is very common in many of the countries where majority population makes some narratives regarding the minority population on the basis of religion, ethnicity, and language. So why it was important for me to think about when I started learning about genocide and genocidal acts, that I found that when we talk about the early stages of genocide, or we talk about the classification us versus them, it's always starts with a very unconscious and unknowing level, from the mass level, from the root level. We sometimes make derogatory comments about certain population, about certain group, without understanding that it is derogatory. So if we we are aware of genocidal acts, we are aware of majority, minority, ethnicity, and all these things, then it is really easy for us to teach the young generation especially that we should not make such derogatory comments regarding other minorities or other groups in a country. I still believe that we are a secular state in Bangladesh and we live together, all the Muslims, Hindus. But this story, which I heard in my childhood, that really helped me to understand how we make the differentiation of us versus them, as Professor Gregory Stanton mentioned in his 10 stages of genocide. And here we see that the early signs are really important to notice in our country, so that in an earlier stages, we can halt any of the stage and which will ultimately stop the genocidal acts before it actually happens. So learning about genocide is really important also because it helps us to know about the term, for example, anti-Semitism, Holocaust, racism, ethnic cleansing, and the different forms of discrimination and dehumanization that helps us to understand the dynamics and process of the extermination of a particular group. For example, if we see the genocide happened in Myanmar, one of the activists, Mong Zerni, he claimed it as a slow poisoning of genocide, which means that it is a process. It is a 50 years process in relation to Myanmar, in relation to Rohingya genocide that ultimately turned into a genocidal acts. So when I talk to my students in Bangladesh, both in undergraduate level and in master's level, I teach 2 courses, which I will elaborate a little bit later. I sometimes find that they ask me a question that why do we need to read about it? Why do we need to know about genocide? What happened 50 years back, 60 years back in some other countries or even in my own country? So that is, we need to talk more about it, that genocide, this particular word or genocidal studies, genocidal education, genocide education, this is not only for specific discipline or for specific students. It should be taught in, I would rather believe, in a high school level, so that in the language which they will understand, so that when they will be growing up, they will understand that how to behave with other minority groups in a more equal footing and not to do discrimination, not to make derogatory comments. So this is very important to understand for the students, for the young generation. When they will be taught genocide studies, it will be helpful for them to understand these dynamics. So another thing is, whenever we talk about genocide studies, genocide education, we generally think, or we generally give more focus on the crimes, on the modes of liabilities, on the criminals, but that's not all about genocide education. Genocide education also talks about the pre-stages, how the dynamics happen, the discrimination, the majority group, the minority group, and also after the persecution. As we know, the last stages of genocide is the denial of genocide, which also needs to understand. And more importantly, we need to talk more about the victims, the survivors, what are the priorities and the justice perceptions of the victims. Because if we look into the history, whenever there are post-conflict mechanism happened, it's very rare that we give much importance to the perception of justice by the victims. Sometimes we see the state or the international organization, they make a formal or informal mechanism and then they start the process. But it's very important to also know what the victims want, what are the priorities of the victims, and then only we will be able to make them satisfied, or they will be satisfied that yes, justice has been happened. In genocide studies, I found out that case studies play a very, very significant role, because when I talk about genocide, I talk about the definition of genocide, that is one thing. But when I really talk about what happened in Rwanda, what happened with the Jews in the Holocaust, what happened in Bosnia, what happened in Cambodia or in Bangladesh in 1971, that really helped the students to understand that what kind of horrific acts have been committed against a certain population. Sometimes if you do not, if you're not from history department, or if you do not know the history well, you may not know even your own country's history. And that also happened in my country as well. When I give them detailed case studies, I teach them in a detailed way about the killing, about the rape, about the arsoning, then only they understand that how much deep it was. So it's very important to give the case studies, to talk about the important case studies, to make them understand and aware them about the genocidal acts. And as I said before that, I have been learning genocide and genocidal issues for last 15 years. And when I started teaching in University of Dhaka, there is a newly established Department of Criminology in 2014. And then I convinced the chairperson and then the whole group of academics that we need to teach genocide. And then I developed 2 modules, one for undergraduate course, that is called Crimes Against Humanity and Genocide, and one in master's level, that is Genocide and Justice. And I have been teaching both the courses in Department of Criminology, and I believe that is the only department who offer a course solely on genocide. So in both the courses, I try to incorporate not only from the legal perspective, but also include the socio-cultural perspective, the historical perspective, the perpetrator's mind, why they do this, how it happens, and how the process of genocide occur, and also the denial process, what are the perception of justice. I have a specific chapter on transitional justice, the formal and informal mechanism of justice process, and it really helped me to connect with the student regarding the genocidal acts, both in Bangladesh and also in other countries of the world. And it really made them a different person when they finished the course. So I really saw the impact of the genocide education throughout the courses. So as I say that, I tried not only incorporate the legal perspective, but also the socio-cultural perspective. And that is also, we really need to understand that whenever we talk about genocide, when we talk about the genocide education, it needs to be from interdisciplinary approach, so that every aspect of genocide can get included. And I also would like to say that for a long period of time, we said that Bangladesh is a forgotten genocide, though it has been recognized much later. And even last year, International Association of Genocide Scholars, they gave a formal recognition of Bangladesh genocide. But I still feel that since I have been working on genocide and genocide education, that there are a lot of good websites, there are a lot of modules in different countries on genocide education. I really do not find about Bangladesh genocide much. So I think also as a Bangladeshi, whenever I get opportunity, I talk about the genocide that occurred, that committed against us in 1971. And that also, I think, if we talk more about Bangladesh genocide along with other genocides, that will help us to connect with other people, those who do not know much about genocide, Bangladesh genocide. That is also will be helpful for us in future. And I also would like to mention that as an academic, not only academics will play a role to educate or to aware or to make conscious other people on genocide education. The importance of research centers, important websites, research, academic research papers, and also museums are important in genocide education, because that is also a part of genocide education. For example, I would like to mention about Liberation War Museum, Bangladesh, which has been serving tremendously for many years from now. And especially when the International Crimes Tribunal established 2010 in Bangladesh, we as a team, we had extensive research on genocide and justice issues. We gave voluntary support to the research wing of the tribunal. And then in 2014, a center has been established, Center for the Study of Genocide and Studies, where I worked as a coordinator for 4 years. So I think Liberation War Museum, important websites and research centers, museum can also play a very significant role to educate people and to aware people, to make people conscious about genocide, genocidal acts, and how to protect a country and how to minimize the classification and differentiation within certain communities. So finally, I would like to finish my presentation with the present Rohingya survivors situation who have been living in Bangladeshi camps. As we all know that the mass influx happened in 2017, and a very small country like Bangladesh has been hosting more than 1 million of population, but no such significant international attempts have been made to share the burden or initiate any formal justice mechanism except the ICJ, the Gambia case. ICC has been doing investigation for years and which has not been finished yet. So hopefully, I think not only educate people about genocide or genocidal acts, the genocide education, genocide studies also will help in future to do more, to do the activism for the survivors, for the victims, so that actually the victims or survivors can get help from the genocide education perspective. Finally, I would like to finish with Desmond Tutu's one quote when he says that we learn about the Holocaust and other genocides so that we can be more human, more gentle, more caring, more compassionate, valuing every person as being of infinite worth, so precious that we know that such atrocities will never happen again and that the world will be a more human place that is hostile to such horrendous occurrences. We will remember them so that we are not doomed to repeat them. So that's why I would like to finish that we also need to learn more about Holocaust and other genocides so that it doesn't happen again and we make a beautiful and more human world for the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for a really thoughtful and interesting presentation. So now we're going to move over to Annie, who will be talking about into the Cambodian context.
So yes, everyone, I am so grateful to be here. And I am the person in this session who's delving a little bit more deeply into the Cambodian context. And the lens that I'm bringing to this context to you today is the lens of the intersectionality between transitional justice, which Ume brought up, reparations, and genocide education. The Cambodian context. Contending with and growing from a difficult, complex past, in the case of Cambodia, there were many decades of violent conflict. The genocide that is known as occurring there happened between 1975 and 1979, but it had violent conflict on both sides of it. The transitional justice piece didn't come around until around 30 years afterwards with the establishment of the ECCC, known also as the Extraordinary Chambers in the Courts of Cambodia. And when this was happening in Cambodia, because of that time lapse, because of the material resources that were available at the time, there was a decision to do moral and symbolic reparations. And one of the things that really sets apart the ECCC is the work they did with symbolic and moral reparations really had a lot to do with education and preservation of history. And that preservation of history and historical narratives was centering around participation of the community members and the survivors of the genocide themselves. So I performed a case study. My case study included 25 key informant interviews. These were leaders of civil society, people who are working with the ECCC, journalists in the area, survivors of the genocide who have dedicated their lives to different peace initiatives or dialogue initiatives or psychosocial initiatives in Cambodia. As well as I did a really in-depth reparation analysis across many modalities, and I continue to delve into this research. Sometimes I do it with my colleagues like Savina Sirik, who continues to do work in Cambodia, and some of it's kind of solo work as well. But the current happenings in Cambodia are fascinating right now and definitely worth the attention of classrooms and teachers, I believe. So my primary question I was asking was, how was the ECCC, the hybrid tribunal, facilitating peace building and reconciliation through partnerships with civil society? And how was this centering around genocide remembrance? And what I found was one really essential, critical key way was through education. This is a photograph of the ECCC, and I bring it up to just share that justice means different things to different people. And that's true in most populations in response to most atrocities, human rights violations, etc. And it's also true in Cambodia. So sometimes the courtroom, the international justice piece was well received by Cambodian locals when I was listening, and other times it was really resented as not the type of justice that really fit the culture or fit the needs of the time. So just know that there's varied kinds of justice and keep that in mind throughout. So something I like to bring up anytime I'm presenting this research or research surrounding this issue is that what a society chooses to remember is one of the most crucial decisions, I believe, that's made in the aftermath of a genocide or a mass atrocity. This decision informs national individual identities. It has generational impact. Memory construction, negotiation, denial, and forced amnesia have all been tried by governments and communities over the years. These approaches have all been justified, every single one of them, even those approaches that they're very different from one another, right? But they have all been justified by some or many in the name of collective healing, reconciliation, restoration, and peace. The results of these approaches, as you may imagine, whether or not they're approached in as an isolated, like they're only trying one of those approaches for a period of time, or whether it's a combination of the above, has mixed results. Educational encounters in Cambodia. Things to consider in the Cambodian context: survivors, descendants, victims, complex victims, perpetrators. All these identities can overlap, which is one of the reasons why this concept of complex victim, which again, I'll mention, I'll give a shout out to Savina Sirik, does really phenomenal work on the idea of complex victimhood in Cambodia, is it's not so easy to draw a line and say, this group of people, nothing wrong. This group of people, everything wrong. It doesn't work well. It doesn't seem to support what Cambodians, when I was listening to Cambodians across the field, what is wanted in the future. Looking in educational encounters, how important testimonies are in this context. There was a moratorium on history education immediately following the fall of the regime, and it's been a really contested space. So it took decades before there was a textbook written by Cambodians, Kamboli Dai, primarily, that focused on a Cambodian authored history education. There was also this book that's right behind me in my background, which was situating Cambodian genocide amongst other genocides that were happening so that students could understand. And this book was produced and disseminated as well by DC Camera, the Documentation Center of Cambodia. Many other instances of educational encounters that were happening at this collaborative point of enacting moral and symbolic reparations demanded by the court through memorials, museum exhibits, digital documentation, the creative mobile app for Khmer history, psychosocial therapy and testimony. And right here is a photo of something that has been taking place, which has to do with this idea of training trainers, so training young scholars to continue this research into the future. The Khmer Rouge genocide and decades of, apologies, I'm getting the spinning wheel of not so good. We all know what that is. Thank you. The Khmer Rouge genocide and decades of violent conflict left an indelible mark on the nation's history. These things are still being dealt with. This is not unique necessarily to the Cambodian context, but still noteworthy. And there's right now a really interesting thing going on. So the Win-Win Monument was created. It was starting to be built in 2016. It was inaugurated in December of 2018. And this is, I would argue, in contrast to a survivor-centered historical narrative. So this narrative is instead saying we are the quote unquote, the real history, as Hun Sen was putting it. He was the prime minister until August of 23 when it was handed over to his son. And this is trying to put out a louder voice, a louder narrative that's saying, yes, the ECCC happened. All these civil society actors were working on this, but do not forget how Hun Sen lifted up peace and created peace. So some have argued that the Win-Win Monument is really portraying something exaggerated, something that is decentering the survivors once more, and wonder what the impacts will be. Now, this year, something that's happening in the current events that's interesting for classrooms to explore is that there are now plans to erect 3 more Win-Win monuments across the country in 3 different provinces. So something to look at. What does that mean? How is the present reacting to the past, and how are those two things interacting? The Win-Win Monument, here are a couple more photos I just want to point out. This is Hun Sen in the upper photo showing off the memorial and this quote unquote real history of Cambodia. And you can see this large gathering here at the inauguration at this monument and what the monument looks like at a more zoomed out scale. So as educators, I think it's important for us to think about when we're looking at genocide education, what difficult histories are. If we look at this definition somewhat loosely, we can see that it's going to be a contested history, histories that have a violent past, identities are at stake, things that we don't necessarily want to embrace but are important to embrace, and not to embrace simplistically but with nuance are really important. And then 5 things from Gross and Terra 2018 that you may want to consider are related to difficult histories, including how they can be central to a nation's history. They tend to refute broadly accepted versions. They connect to questions facing us in the present. So again, that interaction between present and memory. And they often involve violence, collective violence, or state-sanctioned violence, and create disequilibria that challenge existing historical understandings. So how do we teach difficult histories? There's so many ways to go about it, and I think the creativity in Cambodia is significant and worth raising up and highlighting as a really great example. So when I was talking about creating these survivor-centered narratives, here's a great piece of that work. So one of the civil society partners with the reparations is the Bopana Audiovisual Center, and they have done nearly 100, at least that they've published online, acts of memory. These are really wonderfully done, filmed oral histories where the interviewer and interviewee are connected. They tend to be loved ones, relatives, or closely connected in some way. And so not only are those of us lucky enough to watch and to learn from these oral histories, learning the history itself, you're seeing the interaction between generations and what the realization is of the younger generation to learn this history. Often a pattern in these oral histories is, oh my goodness, auntie, uncle, grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, I didn't know that happened. Why are you just now sharing this? And then the answer is because I don't want this to happen again. So again, how much of genocide education is really the really biggest purpose is atrocity prevention in the future. This is Toe Slang Genocide Museum. It was first a school turned into a place of great bloodshed as a prison. And Toe Slang does a lot of really interesting work. They do art exhibits. They have a lotus room for reconciliation. Over here, I won't read it aloud, but you'll see kind of their mission statement that remains to this day and how and what they believe the purpose of this memory is, again, to promote peace in the hope that this is not repeated. This is one of the most well-received reparation projects. It involved many civil society partners, including Sofaline Art. Sofaline is the teacher here in the third photo from the left, teaching a student. And this is all still shots from Pakasla Kromenka, which means forced marriage under Enka. This was, as much as many of the reparation projects, there were critics and then there were those who thought they were great. This one had the most positive overall overarching reviews because it was talking about this subject that so many wouldn't talk about and so many descendants and people currently living today were impacted by. They were the children of the forced marriages. This is work being done by TPO. This is the testimonial therapy going on. You can see the testimony being read aloud in front of monks, community members, and students. Again, another type of educational encounter, ones that tend to be very story-oriented, human-centered, and powerful. Another way that you see this is through the Kadai Karuna group. They worked in conjunction with the reparation projects to create graphic novels to explore and to reach many students about what happened during the genocide. So as you can see, there are many approaches to genocide education and the use of digitization and modern technologies, the use of exposure and bringing people together who may not meet each other otherwise, how key that is. The visual and performing arts and this cultural revitalization, which was something that was under deep attack during the genocidal years, is all. Multiple ways to frame. Oh, sorry. I'm not going to focus on this too much, but if you're interested in this, please contact me. The idea of the roles that can be played both by those, the pedagogy of the marginalized and the pedagogy of the privileged.
Another.
Role of genocide education, multi-level healing, atrocity prevention, mutual respect and thriving, restoration, opportunities for conflict transformation, opportunities to use our imaginations, creativity, and to have effective dialogues with one another. So with that, that is my presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Another really interesting presentation. I'll start off until we get a question. I think one thing that I found that was really interesting, especially in Ami's presentation, was her comment about the fact the Bangladesh genocide isn't talked about much in genocide studies generally around the world. And I just wanted to draw your attention to the sort of like the IAGS Genocide Education Project, where we're looking for case studies to get experts from around the world, you know, including yourself, of course, about building up a more in-depth case study that educators could use. So that would be something that I will talk about with you later, because I thought you're right. When I've looked at genocides, generally it tends to be Rwanda, Armenia, and the Holocaust. I found it really interesting perspective. So we have one question. What was the name of the graphic novel?
The graphic novel, the English translation of the name of it is You and I, and it can be found in full form on the Kadai Karuna website. That's KDEI-KARUNA. Means memory and compassion.
Looking for some questions. I've got
I
another
have a
one.
question for Ume.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Ume, I really loved your presentation and the educational aspects to that. And something that stuck out to me was in the beginning of your presentation when you speak about the red ant and black ant story. And I was wondering how you mentioned how when you matured, you realized that was a myth, right? And I was wondering, how do you present those kinds of things to your students so that a process of unlearning and rediscovery can happen?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Annie. Yeah, it was really when I started teaching the courses, it was also a process for myself as well, because I did not teach genocide before. I may give presentations, I did research, but teaching is something different. You have to have the dialogue with your students. And so many times it happened that they also said, yes, we also heard this story. It is very common in the same place where I grew up, and they also heard the same story. And I asked them that, how do you think about it? Do you think it's really called the black one is this religion and red one is that religion? And then they started thinking of that. Then the brainstorming started. Oh yeah, I also heard it, but I also never thought about it, because generally we're from the majority, so we don't care. And sometimes we don't think that it is derogatory for the other person. And also for the indigenous people, sometimes we say that because for our indigenous people, that their noses are not sharp, so we use some derogatory comments when we try to portray someone as an indigenous people, that, oh, your noses are like an indigenous people, but we say it in a very derogatory way. So that is the brainstorming exercise for the students and for me as well, to de-learn and then relearn, and to understand that with the myths and with the things we have grown up, everything was not with well thought and was not with wisdom. We need to sometimes de-learn and relearn. Yeah, so that was an interesting process for both the students and for me as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a question from Kim. Could you speak, this is to Ami, could you speak more about the refugee camps and how they're affecting people in Bangladesh?
Regarding, I have visited the camps already twice, but if you could just, which perspective to express now regarding the Rohingya people? I mean, what to...
Okay, waiting for Kim to come back.
I think,
please.
I think just the idea of how, how is this affecting everyday life? It's a small country. You've got this huge influx of people. How's that affecting everyday life for so many years now?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. So the mass influx happened in 2017, but I think for many years, Rohingyas have been coming to Bangladesh, but not on that level. From 2017, more than almost 1 million people came, and now they are more than 1 million because a lot of children are born every single day. So the camp life is really something which you will not believe or which you will not understand sitting here or somewhere in a city or some other country. When you really go into the camp and when you really start walking inside the camp and you go to the deep down camp, you will find a different world, and it is so much different. It is like according to the Rohingyas, I will write it in my thesis that they call it an open prison, because maybe they are alive now, they have survived the genocide, but this life is very much, there is no basic rights are very much limited. The food is limited. They don't have any employment. They don't have any ownership to own property or anything. There are extremist group within the Rohingya community who threaten them, who cause different kinds of problems and torture. There are massive amount of trafficking, drug dealing are going on, because Rohingyas are the cheapest labor for the perpetrators who are involved with smuggling or trafficking for the sexual exploitation. And there is no privacy. In a small room, there are like 5 people, 8 people of a family, and it's so congested and it's so disorganized inside the camps, though the Bangladesh government is trying hard with the international relief and fund, but it is so huge and the amount of people is so much that it's really now getting on our nerves. And also the local Bangladeshis are also now thinking that a huge area are now covered by the Rohingya refugees. Sometimes they get mixed up with the Bangladeshis. They are going to other districts and they're getting involved with criminal activities. So it's like, I think we are going to get into a more trouble if we do not get any assistance, or if the justice process are not being started soon. It will really be a problem for all of us to handle the situation and the huge amount of Rohingyas who are living in camps right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'd like to add here,
okay.
in case of Rohingya issue, the thing is, you see, Bangladesh being a small country, actually, it is having many challenges. So actually, to actually carry out or carry over with this refugee thing, refugee people, it is really very hard, because there are also some risk as well. Bangladesh, it has some kind of political situation, and it is there's a place called Bhashanchar, where government has made some place for them to stay there, though that place is a bit remote, but that will be more, they could live in a better way. Last thing what I'd like to say, that in case of Bangladesh, when actually our refugee had gone to India, then many people from our side, they had to also stay inside the sewerage pipes, because there was no actually camps as such. So this kind of problem was happening. But the thing is, now the leaders or concerned people should look at this matter and help us, help Bangladesh, so that this issue is somehow supported. I'm saying many people could be taken to other countries, or with Myanmar, it could be solved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there's a question for you. Could you maybe give some suggestions about available materials to teach about the genocide in Bangladesh?
To me, you're asking to
me? Yeah, to both of you really, because you're both talking about the education, and just like Annie has linked to that, have you got anything similar?
If I start first, the thing is, I also touched a bit, saying that the testimonies and also some documents that we have, the electronic documents and others that we have from all over the world. So basically, we have to decide, make a very good curriculum so that on the basis of that, we can identify what are the supporting educational materials could be that will help us, because having, we need to make them clear regarding one is the concept of genocide and also the history, our culture and heritage, everything, and what are the main connections due to which all this happened. And also after, especially the post-genocide society that we had came across, we had come across with, because there are some denial attempts all through, because you see still until 1996, we could not listen in our main public media speech of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the call that he gave on 7th of March, and also regarding the perpetrators in the media, it was banned. We cannot say Pakistan or Al-Badr, Rajakar, Al-Shams, those who were the perpetrators. That finally it was open, or it was possible to listen or hear after 1990s, when there was a very strong civil society movement. And I also being a descendant of a martyred family, because we also had to experience a very hard life, traumatic phases. So that's why the current generation, they are really not in touch with all these concepts. So that's why what I said, I'm just finishing now. What I just said, that having a good curriculum, we can then have some good education materials, including all kind of audiovisual and others.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying, there aren't many educational materials at the moment.
And Lorna, yes, and if you also look into some websites, as you mentioned that, for example, the website of Liberation Museum, there is one Center for Genocide Studies. And also, if you just Google the verdicts of the cases under the International Crimes Tribunal, everything is in the website, you can find in the internet. Those are really, really important thing, because you will find the testimonies, you will find the perpetrators, the crimes and the verdict, and a deep explanation of the crimes, and everything is there. So the verdicts of the under the International Crimes Tribunal cases are really important and good source of understanding Bangladesh genocide, I would rather say.
Okay, thank you. That's really useful to know. I guess one of the things that I would say is that maybe, obviously after the conference, we should draw up a list of, scholarly works on the Bangladeshi genocide and make it available via the IAGS website, so that we can perhaps try and encourage more genocide educators to add Bangladesh. I know that speaking to quite a few teachers in the UK, some of the problems with ease of access, and they don't have the time.
Yes.
May I just add one very recent experience? I had been to UCS, University of Southern California, USC, University of Southern California. They have a very big, actually, archive, historic archive. But over there, I found that testimonies from all over the world, around 57,000 testimonies are there, but Bangladesh is excluded. So that is a big concern, that why Bangladesh should not be there. And also in terms of testimonies, our country also lacks, that is the scale of testimonies we should organize and actually record. That we are still missing, that we need to do. Still, there are demand to that.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question for you, Annie. Do you have any advice for advancing education about Bangladesh, but based on your work in Cambodia? It seems like, some of what you're saying could be really helpful towards, discussions about Bangladeshi genocide.
Yes, and I do teach about the Bangladeshi genocide. I included in my atrocity prevention course at the University of Maryland. Something I found really helpful and things that students really enjoy and things I have found also for Bangladesh. One example would be the 2019 film, the name escapes me, but it's looking specifically at sexual violence in Bangladesh. I can probably find the name for you all. Podcasts about different genocides. Podcasts are very popular with students, having them listen to them, try to figure it out. Again, not listening to things wholesale to believe everything you hear, but to do comparisons and to understand and to get your brain thinking and asking questions. I asked Ume that question because one of our primary first projects they do is an unlearning project where they pick something from their own history that they need to unlearn. We also try to be very participatory. So if I have a Bangladeshi student in the class, if I have a Cambodian student, recently I've had a lot of students from Ethiopia in my class. We keep the syllabi malleable because sadly, heartbreakingly, there are far too many genocides to cover in any one semester. So if people have a personal connection through family, through travel, through whatever the reason is that they want to learn more about a particular area in genocide, I always maintain a flexible syllabus. And if there's something like that that happens where it's something I'm not an expert in, I recruit them to help me find those materials. So then those can be options in the future too. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. It just reminds me, I work very closely with Remembering Srebrenica, the UK NGO, and the podcasts about the genocide were a huge impact, really launched Remembering Srebrenica amongst the general population. So I would absolutely endorse that. Looking in the question and answers, Annie, the name of the film is Rising Silence.
Yes, thank you, whoever looked that up, because I didn't want to give you the wrong name.
So is the film easily accessible? Because I know that I suggested some to students and they've had to go via Amazon or Netflix and had to pay. And I think Quo Vadis was, that was about Srebrenica. So is Rising Silence?
It looks like to me, and you might start to hear some sound, hopefully not. It looks like, let me see, press kit events contact. I think you can contact the film people directly, which I've done before for other films. And given your educators, I hope that they would be supportive. Here, I just sent the Rising Silence link.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. I would agree with you about contacting directly because, the Angelina Jolie film about the Cambodia, they sent me the course pack that goes with it. That was really, really free course pack, really useful and really very interesting. Any other questions? Yes, so Ryan said it's not, you can arrange viewing through the director, so we know who to contact about that.
And sometimes, speaking to what you just said, Lorna, I did that with a film for Cambodia until they're all gone. And before I knew it, I had people from that film willing to come to class and be a guest speaker. Like people love to be contacted because they're happy to know other people care. They have a similar goal.
I think that's really good. And as you know, Annie, because you're part of the working group, that's one thing this sort of the educating on genocide group wants to do is to provide a list of resources and suggestions. So we'll be contacting everybody after this because the more insight, the more input we can get, the better.
Agreed.
Any other questions, anyone? I'm just looking back through the chat.
If I may,
Yeah,
we
of course,
have a
Kate.
question coming in via text. Requesting that Annie repeat the name of the book that you referenced that's on your background.
Oh, this book? This one is not very attainable. This one is by DC Cam, and it's one that's written in Khmer. So unless the person's asking for things written in the Khmer language in Khmer, but I'm happy if that person wants to contact me, I'm happy to send them what I do have, which I believe is the Khmer version of that book. And my email, I'll put it in the chat.
Yes, that's a resource EIHR is familiar with. I think we have some information on it, but again, I don't know that it's in English.
Yes, I know it's misleading because the title here is in English, but what I'm able to actually access online was in Khmer. So, but the other textbook I mentioned, the first one written by Cambodia Dai about the Khmer Rouge history and over like 30 years afterwards, that one is again, kind of like you and I on the other website, if you go to DCCAM, which stands for Documentation Center of Cambodia, they have tons of resources, and inclusive there, you can download the full version of that textbook in English.
I like the edition in English. It reminds me, part of my research is British government's response to genocide, a bit like Samantha Power's A Problem from Hell. It's a British perspective. And when I was looking at Britain and Cambodia, they didn't have anybody after the British withdrew who could actually speak Khmer. So there'd no way of really knowing what was happening. So, Ame?
Yeah, hi, thanks. I have a question for Annie. I mean, when I was listening to your presentation, I think in the beginning you said something that society chooses what to remember. So, do you think that this society, it covers it gives equal importance to not only the who is running the state also, or not only the academics, but also the perception of the victims or the survivors that also get included equally? How did you feel about it? What was your experience? Thank you.
That is such a great question, and it changes over time. So if you look dramatically, if you look right after the fall of the Khmer Rouge, when the Vietnamese came in, there was one type of narrative. Then the narrative was extricated, and there was a moratorium on recent history, and the idea was bury the past. That's how we're going to heal. We're going to have amnesia. We're not going to talk about it. That didn't really work out too well. Neither does talking about it endlessly. Some people do all heal differently. So when we look at how society can answer, what seems to work best, what I've seen is allowing people in their own ways to come forward and share those testimonies. And in the case of Cambodia, at least, I would argue that the government narrative is contested, and there's resistance narratives to that in Cambodia. An example I'll give. So yes, you can go to DCCAM and you can download that textbook written by Kamboli Dai, who's a wonderful individual. He is under constraints. Not every country has the same laws around censorship. He was not allowed to write anything critical of Hun Sen. He wasn't even allowed to mention that Hun Sen was at one time part of the Khmer Rouge, right? So there are things lacking. I've also been warned as a researcher that you can download in both Khmer and in English, and those two versions are not the same. They're presenting something in the English version that's a little bit different than in the Khmer version. So just keep those things in mind. Does it mean that you fully can't get anything out of those resources? No. But it does mean there are things to consider when you are looking at those resources.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you very much again to the panelists. Really thoughtful and interesting presentations that I really did enjoy. And we've now reached the end, well, slightly about 30 seconds early, but we'll have the 10-minute break before we come back. And who's the next?